Hey, over here in the corner. My name is Ryan, and on my new channel, I'm going to be bringing you some of the craziest, true horror stories you've ever heard in your life, as told to you by the people who lived them. And so, I'm going to just jump right in and tell you about an experience that my family and I had about 30 years ago. And this story has needed to be told for decades. So, come with me, and let's find out what it was like when I went below the darkness. Alright, you see, I grew up in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. It's like the suburbs of Hollywood, you know? 3 of the major movie studios are located here. Celebrities make their homes here, and more movies and TV shows have been filmed here than can probably even be counted. So, back in the 80s and 90s, both of my parents were real estate agents. My stepdad, Stan, he had his own real estate company, and so that's what they did. They sold houses, and he also managed a few office buildings. Well, there was a building. An inconspicuous, not very big, run-of-the-mill strip mall kind of place that was located on the west side of the valley. It was built around 1980, if I am correct, and it changed ownership more than a few times throughout the years, for reasons that you're going to learn about in this episode. So, my stepdad Stan was always the one in charge of selling the property, and then after it was sold, he stayed on board as the leasing agent, so if somebody showed up and was interested in getting a spot in this building, they would contact him, as you can see right here on this sign. This building looked about as 80s as it can possibly get. It was a place you would drive past, and you would never think twice about it, unless you were going there, intentionally. There were a few businesses that I remember being there. One of them was a 24-hour emergency animal clinic, like a 24-hour vet. Right next door to that was a prominent pizza chain that still exists to this day, and then up on the second floor overlooking the boulevard was a hair salon. I remember Stan and my mom always talking about that place as being like some sort of problem, like a problem property. Sometimes they even joked that it was cursed. Now, this is because for years, none of the tenants would stay in the spot that they rented, or leased, for a very long time at all. Like, they would sign a 1 or a 2-year agreement, and they would end up leaving within 2 or 3 months, or something like that. Things were always going wrong there. Like, I remember hearing that people would fall down the stairs. Luckily, nobody was ever seriously hurt, but they all reported that they felt that they had been pushed, but nobody was there to do the pushing. The walls would explode, like the pipes would burst, and water would shoot all over the place, and the electrical was problematic. There was a lot of issues with this building. But those 2 businesses that I mentioned, the pizza place and the vet, those were the only places in the entire building that were never affected by the same problems that all the other tenants were forced to deal with. There was even a spot on the asphalt toward the back of the parking lot that for years would crack and crumble and bulge and sink no matter how many times it was repaved. Same spot, same exact damage. It was like something that couldn't be seen was always pushing through from below. Stan, my stepdad, and the property owners had professionals out there to try to figure out what was going wrong. They thought maybe it might be liquefaction, or the tree roots, or some sort of sinkhole. But nothing was ever found, so it was just a frustrating thing. For many years, they redid the asphalt like 3 or 4 times. But aside from the parking lot always destroying itself, everything else that went wrong could really be explained by clumsy customers. Maybe they just tripped and fell down the stairs themselves, or faulty wiring, old pipes, maybe? You know, who knows? So while it was joked about the building being cursed for a long time, no one in my family ever really seriously thought that anything supernatural might actually be happening. Over the years, all of these problems kind of became a running joke around our house. The place had always been trouble. It was just trouble, and no one could do anything about it, so we just kind of learned to live with it. Around 1991-ish, my stepdad briefly was involved with the crowd that was forming Death Row Records, the hip-hop label. He got into that crowd through a family friend who was an executive and also head counsel at Death Row. So Stan, he ended up handling all of the real estate deals for the record label. So he was finding office buildings and finding homes for the executives and the talent and just handling all of their real estate stuff. Over time, Stan's involvement with the record label became part of the regular background noise in my life. And it got to the point where we were invited to various industry parties and mixers being held for the label. I was 14 years old, but I remember going to one of these parties, but I don't remember much about it. Only that it was at a really large house, and there were a lot of people there. And of course, there were a few interesting characters hanging out. I mean, you can imagine people wanted to be there when something huge was starting. So one of them, we're gonna call her Marlene. She billed herself to the crowd as like a spiritual advisor or a sorceress of some sort. She was hired by Death Row to get rid of negative energies or anything that could affect them negatively. They brought her in for. At the time, I felt like, okay, that's kind of weird, but it also made a lot of sense to me. I just figured they were covering their bases. I mean, they clearly didn't want anything getting in the way of their plans to become one of the world's most respected hip-hop labels. And Marlene, doing what she did for them, would help them leave nothing to chance. Anyway, so at one of these parties, Stan took a business card from Marlene, and he brought it home and he stuck it in some junk drawer in our house, and it was just left there, and there was no way for us to know that one day that card would become a lifeline for us. So now let's jump ahead to the next year, to the middle of 1992. I'm now in 10th grade, and I'm 15 years old. So one day, Stan pulls me aside and mentions to me that the hair salon located on the second floor of the, cursed property that he managed needed to be cleaned out because new tenants were moving in. I guess a year earlier, the owners, not the owners, but the tenants in the previous salon moved out all of a sudden. They broke their lease and left abruptly. They actually left so quickly that they left all their stuff there, all their equipment and products and things. And that stuff had just laid around for a whole year until it was time till he finally leased the property to new salon tenants, and it needed to be cleaned out to make way for them. So he wanted to know if me and a friend wanted to, if we were interested in making like $100 each, to go with him to the property and clean the salon out. And I had a buddy named Chris. We had a couple of businesses going. We got into a lot of trouble together, and, we were tight, and so $100 sounded like $1 million to a couple of teenagers, and so we were definitely down. So one night, the three of us, we went to the salon to begin the process of cleaning it up. It was about midnight. I remember walking into basically a huge mess. Like, there was hair product and trash scattered everywhere, unopened stuff and some stuff that had burst on the floor, hair dyes and things like that. There was a bluish glow from the moon, like flooding into the place. And the electricity wasn't on, so it really filled the salon in like a trippy kind of surreal light. And their expensive equipment was still there. They left like 3 or 4 of those hair dryers with the dome that goes over your head. They just left those there. It was strange to see. I also noticed teal and blue tiles that had fallen off the wall and panels that had dropped off the ceiling, and the sinks where you would put your head back in to wash your hair. Those had cracked and broken. It all fed right in to what I had heard about this place for so long, that these unexplained things would happen and it would drive the attendants out of their units. But anyway, me and Chris, we were business minded, and when we walked into the place, we saw all this stuff and we're like, I wonder if we could sell this crap. And we asked my stepdad, hey, can we take some of this stuff home? It looks really good. Maybe we can set up a booth on a corner, like a lemonade stand or whatever, and sell the stuff. And he said, yeah, go for it, because otherwise we're going to take it down to the trash tonight. That's what we're doing here. So we gathered up a lot of the good stuff that we thought was valuable and put it in boxes and put them out on the walkway so we could bring them down to the car later. And then, we spent the rest of the night mopping, scrubbing, sweeping, cleaning up the mess. The job took hours. I think it was like maybe 4:30 in the morning before we were even close to being done. And I needed a breather, and I was antsy and I was hungry. So I went outside onto the walkway, and there was a couple of other units upstairs, just sort of down the line from the salon. And I was just like walking back there all the way to the end. I'm like walking, trying the doors, seeing if any would open. And actually, one of them did open. So I went inside that unit to explore, and it was empty. We're not talking like a place that had a company in it. It was just an empty space for a business to be in. It was kind of perfect for like a small real estate company or an insurance company or travel agency or something like that. There was like a receptionist area up front, and then like a long space where you might have cubicles or desks, that kind of setup. And then in the back there was like a bathroom, like behind a wall there was a bathroom, like a little kitchenette area with a fridge and a microwave. So I made my way towards the back because there wasn't anything left to see up front. And when I got back there, I found a closet. It was facing opposite from the kitchenette area. This was a practically useless storage closet. It was very small, and there was nothing in it except at the top there was a shelf, and there was like a box, like a storage box filled with junk up on the shelf, but I couldn't really see it because it was way up there. So all I could see was a couple of office supplies sticking out of the top of this mysterious corrugated cardboard box. So I brought it down and I started looking through it with my flashlight, and I remember there was a coffee mug filled with colored pencils, and there was paper clips and just basic office stuff, that maybe they forgot to bring with them whenever whoever this tenant was, left. But the weird thing was that at the bottom of the box there was a book. It was a little paperback, if I remember correctly, called Witchcraft and Sorcery. And I'm 15 years old, and I'm into heavy metal and horror movies and aliens and ghosts and all that kind of stuff. So this book was awesome to me. And so I flipped through it, and I noticed some kind of strange aspects to it. Like, it didn't seem to have an author per se. It said edited by Max Marwick, but not that it was written by him. Now, I've done research in recent years, and I know that it was written by him back in 1970, and it went through like 5 editions. But back in the day, that really did trip me out, thinking it had no author. Now, this was a very advanced book. It was a difficult read for me at age 15. This book talks about how witchcraft and sorcery extend into modern times and the social implications of it all. This was such a weird book to find in a box in a vacant office unit, you know? But it wasn't like an ancient tome or anything. Like, it was recent for the time period. But I didn't care. Like, who cares? So I wanted to check it out further. So I brought it home with me, and I just sort of had it in my room for a few months. And anyway, I kind of forgot about it. I had flipped through it enough, and I got tired of it, and I put it somewhere. And one day my mom was in my room for some reason. I think maybe she was doing laundry or something. I don't know. And she was looking around, and she found the book in my room. And she wasn't a believer in the occult. She wasn't superstitious or religious for that matter. She just didn't want me reading it. I think there was just something that bugged her about her son sitting in his room reading a book on witchcraft and sorcery. And it just didn't sit well with her, so she took it and she put it under her bed, and it was kind of forgotten about after that. Hey, I'm guessing you want to know what happens next. Well, you'll have to wait for that. But the good news is that part 2 and part 3 are in the works. And in part 2, that's where things are going to go kind of crazy, and the story will take a deeper dive into the darkness. But in the meantime, please consider subscribing to my channel if you're enjoying what I'm doing here. Please leave me a like, a comment, and definitely share this with people you think might also enjoy this. And so until the next episode drops, my name is Ryan, and I'll see you next time on Below the Darkness.